So, why do people GM? Really, the first question somebody might be asking themselves when they say, okay, I want a GM. And then maybe you get to a point you say, okay, why am I doing this? What was I ever thinking? Why did I want to do this in the first place? This is scary. I'm terrified. Everyone's looking at me. What do I do now? Why might this be a good idea? Maybe there's people here in the audience who haven't decided to GM a game yet, and they're wondering if that's going to be right for them. And maybe that's why you're here. So I'm going to go over some of the reasons that I think people would make for good GMs, or a sign that if this fits you, maybe this is something you might be interested in. Kay, do you have a question?
So I have had a group ask me to GM for them, and they have never played before, really. So what's your best tip for GMing with brand new players? One's never even picked up a D&D book. She just heard about it like 30 years ago and wants to try it.
Okay. Um, so there's a piece of advice I'm going to give later on that involves just telling you to take a deep breath and relax, because, and I'll hit this again later, none of them know what to expect. You really can't do anything wrong. You will not be subverting or not living up to anyone's expectations, because they have nothing with which to base it on. So you're actually starting with a clean slate, which is fantastic. So if you're the kind of person, when you're having a party, if you like to be the host of a party, if that brings you joy and happiness, making sure other people are all having a good time, that's a good sign. That's a great trait in a GM. If you hate doing that, jamming might not be the thing for you. If when your friends are having a party, if you're the kind of person that they look to teach the rules, like, oh, how do we play this? Steve, like, you always know this stuff. Teach us how to play. People are already having a tendency to look at you, and there's a good chance that if they are asking you for that, you've probably got some decent ability in explaining things to people. It's another definite good sign that you have some of the good traits of being a GM. If you're the one who's always suggesting what to play, if everybody's looking at you and saying, oh, what should we play tonight? Marcy, yeah, what do we play? What do you guys want to play? What do you want to play? Tell us something cool. It's a couple things here. One, it means that they probably trust you in some way. And two, they're already looking at you as a leader. They're asking you to decide, what are we going to do? So that you're automatically already placed kind of in that driver's seat, and people are used to it. I see this dynamic play out in lots of small friend groups, that there's kind of always one person who fills that role, and people expect in some ways to fill that role. So having some leadership qualities, or being perceived of as a leader within the group, is a definite asset, because when you GM, you do kind of become the de facto leader. Yes, XP Lovecraft says people want a GM to improve their skills: improv, public speaking, social confidence. When I'm explaining GMing in the context of why is it, or role playing games, like why are they useful other than just having fun and as a diversion, those are some of the things that I talk about. Public speaking abilities are improved by GMing. Improvisational creativity, thinking on your feet, quick reaction times, social awkwardness, all of these things are improved by GMing. GMing can really can help a person really bloom and kind of as a human being. And maybe you just thought it would be fun to try it. You're absolutely right, because GMing to me is the most fun that you can have within the context of role playing. I say 98% of the time here on the slide is probably more than that. So, uh, Chris Handyhouse has said, "Is your nickname Bossy Pants? DMing might just be for you." You mean on this slide right here, reasons to not GM? But kidding. So, anybody who wants to, uh, we'll take hands and verbal responses right now, or you can just type it in the chat. What is it that's bringing you to want to GM? And if the answer is the players are holding me hostage and we're not going to play unless I do this, that's okay too. So just look at some of the responses. Fenster Baby wants to create worlds. Loves, yeah, find other people to play with. If no one else is GMing, you don't have a group. Storytelling, yeah. New ways to connect with friends, yeah. RPGs are a great way to hang out and do stuff with friends that have moved away. Theater nerd, awesome. Sharing it with the family, yeah, definitely sharing with the family. When it comes down to the you're being the DM just because we want to get the game going. I'm a soccer referee. High school, other competitive levels of soccer. We always have this saying of, no referee, no game. Without the referee, it's gym class. And you can't really have much of an RPG without a game master, unless you find RPGs that don't need a game master. And I can actually share with you several of those. Fiasco, yes, Angela, Fiasco does not require a GM. Our Last Best Hope is GMless. Um, the Quiet Year has no GM. There's so many really cool games that don't require a GM, and they play differently, but definitely check them out. Because sometimes you don't have a GM. Sometimes you just want to break. Fiasco, Our Last Best Hope, The Quiet Year, all three of those require no preparation. You can sit down at the table together, boom, play a game. Nobody's on the hook to be the GM. That's really, really cool. When did DM change to GM? When people stopped playing Dungeons and Dragons and started playing other games. Exactly. And it seems there's some kind of I'll call it almost pretentious thing where each game seems to want to create its own nickname for the dungeon master. So D&D calls the dungeon master. Call of Cthulhu refers to that as the keeper. I've seen games call them the judge, the referee. Game master is just a nice impartial word, like game facilitator. That's how I refer to myself a lot of times, as more of a facilitator of the game. Yes, I will. Rowan, please email me or just drop that into my pipeline somehow. So I'll add those to the list. All right. What are some reasons that you may not be a good GM, or you probably shouldn't be GMing? Tour guide, yes. Yes, yes, yes. So tour guide says, I'm a tour guide for the campaign, and that is a fantastic attitude to have. That really puts you in the right frame of mind, in my opinion, to be a great GM. If the reason you're in this is you've got this incredible story in your head and you want to have it acted out at the table, it's so detailed, and I've written all these intricate family histories and on and on and on and on and on. Yeah, no worries, Noah. This is a sign that you may have written a play or a screenplay, or you've written a novel, and nobody wants to be inflicted with someone else's fan fiction. So we want to play things that have directions to go. We're not trying to recreate a story. If you were to play Return of the Jedi, but you were trying to recreate the whole thing, how much of a game really is that, other than just, I don't know, reciting your favorite lines from the game? Yes, Noah, this will be recorded, and I will share the link at the end in the group messaging system. If you want to be Miss Bossy Pants, Mr. Bossy Pants, you like kind of pushing people around, really terrible, terrible reason to be a GM, because you're not the boss. You may be the arbiter, you may be the referee, but that doesn't make you the boss. It doesn't put you, quote unquote, in charge. When it comes down to it, you are just another player. You just have a different role than the other people at the table. If your goal is to beat them, to beat the players, to use that as a measure of your success, I don't think that that's a great reason. The TPK, total party kill, is not in and of itself a bad thing, but that really shouldn't be a goal unless that's the group's goal. The role of the GM at the table is facilitating the fun. Being a tour guide of the campaign, which tour guide, thank you for putting that up there. That's a great phrasing. And GMing is not a vacuum. The oldest styles of, I'll call it dungeon mastering, came out of wargaming, where they were as much impartial referee as they were bad guy. It was far less about telling the story and far more about going through the mechanical challenge. There was some theater of the mind, but it wasn't initially designed to be, that type of game. Bo talks about Hickman's Killer Breakfast. That's a thing that happens at Gencon every year. People literally line up with character sheets and are plopped onto stage and killed in rapid succession. It's done for comedy and fun. And yeah, it doesn't really quite work in person. If that's your jam, I suggest a game called Kobolds Ate My Baby. The players all play the parts of kobolds, and we all know what the average life expectancy of a kobold is. It's a game done for laughs, but if you like a type of game where you will go through multiple characters in rapid succession, that's a great one. On the silly side, there's a very serious one called Curse the Darkness, which has equally disposable characters, but it's done in seriousness, and we create drama, and it's very easy to create new people. You play the game with the expectation, okay, many of these characters are going to die, and we're telling the overall story and not the story of these particular people. And Tour Guide is also a Paranoia fan. Fantastic. That's one of my early games as well. So this last bullet that I have here about my, this is an attitude that I know it might seem, I don't know, I may come off weird with it, but I think that this is really just the wrong attitude to take. If you make a shift from thinking my table, my game, my players, to thinking of it as our game, our table, our team, our players, and we immediately put it into a collaborative mind space, I think that this puts you in a position to be the best GM that you can possibly be. When you're just, even at the subconscious level, recognizing that none of this belongs to you, all of this belongs to all of us. You have a different role to fill than other people, but it's not your game. So before we delve into a lot of the how-tos and tips and tricks and things like that, and my general advice to people, I'd like to pause and open the floor to some bad GM horror stories. Most people probably have one. If you've got one that you think is particularly horrifying and you think you can tell that story in 30 seconds or so, go ahead and raise your hand. All right, so right now, Bo is the only one raising their hand. Bo, you have the floor. Tell us your GM horror story. You just need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you.
Awesome. All right. So really quick. So I had taken a long break from GMing and gaming. A friend got me into some Pathfinder, and they were always the GM. They wanted me to run it. So that player just power built his Pathfinder character and wanted to play Crunch the whole time with a whole group of people who had never GM'd or played Pathfinder before. And I love the guy to death, but it was a nightmare game to run. It was an adventure path. He was one-shotting everything. It was crazy.
Fun. I have an overly opinionated, not particularly well substantiated, and completely irrational hatred of Pathfinder. So I can smile when I say that, but those of you who have played a lot of it, just based on my personality that you've seen so far, you probably understand why I don't like it. And I see, Dina, you shared that with us yesterday. Yeah, that's a horrifying story. All right, Samantha, what is your GM horror story?
So I was not the GM. My friend talked me into playing the Dragon Age RPG with her and her awful, awful roommate. And he was the GM. He held my character sheet hostage, and like 3 sessions in, I realized he was retconning details of my character. Like he was changing the languages I knew, and he'd changed my background, and he wouldn't believe me. He wouldn't let me see the character sheet again.
Can I feel like I want to analyze this from a psychological point of view. Did he give any explanation? Like, what was the point of that?
He was a hard man to talk to. He really was like the center of the energy in every room he entered. Okay. So I think he just had a bit of a control freak problem.
Okay, some little narcissistic tendencies. Just from a I won't even get into the small group psychology dynamics here, but just if we look at it purely from a gaming point of view, what that person is doing is one of the biggest possible violations of Wheaton's Law that I can think of. Wheaton's Law, for those who are unfamiliar, was a very simple concept summarized by the actor Will Wheaton, very famous nerd. He's one of us, played Wesley Crusher on Star Trek The Next Generation. He sums up Wheaton's Law as thus: don't be a dick. And I could pretty much say that if people could just follow that, every single what do I do with this player at my table or at our table question is simply answered by, if that player could go ahead and start following Wheaton's Law, your problem will go away. But it sounds like that's what he was doing. This GM was removing your agency as a player at the table. They were taking away your power of making decisions. And that's something that is really, really, doing it without having very detailed intentional conversations about that at first is really bad. If it was a thing where part of the expectations of the game where that things about your character may change, for whatever reasons behind the scene, and you're not going to know about them ahead of time. If that's something we talked about and we established, okay, this is part of the game. Yeah, Gosh says I didn't know about that Wheaton's Law. So yeah, of course, again, Samantha says that game fell apart after 2 sessions, and that's totally unsurprising at all. All right, so let's sit Connor. Connor, what's your horror story?
Hi, morning, all. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Perfect. Not as horrific as the last story, certainly. But I had a GM, and I'm not sure how experienced he was at the time. But he was running. I was invited to join in a Song of Ice and Fire campaign, the Green Ronin RPG, and it was fun. But he kind of let one or two players have access to some very powerful items and kind of let the story kind of get away from him. And he decided that the best way to fix that was to essentially railroad us all beyond the wall and have us just fight White Walkers just again and again for 2 hours until we literally ran away. So he had an issue where he had both kind of let players maybe get a bit more powerful or level up, so to speak, a bit faster than he maybe should have. And then he clearly had a concept in mind, like a story in mind that we were supposed to follow. And if that meant that, we were going to get stuck in the same fight over and over again for half a session, then so be it.
Right. There's railroading, and then there's inflicting fanfic upon the players, right? And that was the latter. That was beyond a railroad, and in just really bad form. Quickest way to solve a problem like that when a game gets away from you, and this is one of the best tips I can give to anybody for just being a grown-up, is have a conversation about it. Step out of the game world and have a conversation as GM and players around the table. Say, hey, whoa, you can Ron Burgundy this thing. Say, well, that escalated quickly. I did not think it was going to go in that direction. Hey, what do we do here? This isn't what I thought was going to happen. Let's have a conversation and figure out where do we want to go from here, rather than throw you out from beyond the wall, fight White Walkers until your characters die and or the players at the table literally fall asleep. That's not a great solution. All right, we'll do one more. We'll do Darth Charles. Gordon, if you want to share yours, could you go ahead and type it up, and we can take a look at that in the chat.
So good morning, everybody. Pretty much my GM horror story is I had a small group of players. Longtime GM wanted to take a break, so I stepped in and was running a game. But every time I would come to a dramatic part or start to describe a scene, this other guy would come in and just guess everything. And you guys walk into a room, and of course there's bad guys. We're in the middle of a fight or whatnot, and I pause to give a dramatic scene, and of course there comes reinforcements. I mean, he totally ruined the mood for the other players and stuff, just by guessing everything and just saying out everything of what was going to happen.
Yeah. So, which law of nature was he violating that we just talked about? It can be really difficult when someone is behaving that way, because most likely they don't realize it. I think when someone else is crapping on someone else's fun, most people aren't inherently evil, and I think it's usually done just out of a lack of awareness. And so again, I'll talk several times in here about having conversations that don't have anything to do with things in the game, and that's definitely one that probably should have been addressed. All right, so our next stop here. What do people worry about? Are you worried about some of the things that are on this list? Raise your hand, click your yes button. If not a single thing on here bothers you, go ahead and hit the no. I'd be curious to see if anybody does that. But I'm expecting that almost everyone on the call is going to have one or more of the things on this list that they identify with. And I can say that because I've been asking this question over the course of 10 years, probably at least 20 times to 20 different groups of people. and it's typically the same answers. And this all boils down to one thing. These are all variations on the same topic, and that's this. Syndrome, I'm sorry to hear that. I have some time after this. If you want to stay on later and like just vent, I will be your RPG therapist for a little while and help you get all those bad experiences out of your system. We can chat afterward. So yeah, the biggest problem that people have is just having some difficulty relaxing. So some things I can say about that is, number one, anytime you're anxious about anything, is just take a deep breath. Just pause and relax for a minute. And then remember a couple of things. So when you're worried about, oh my goodness, the players are going to see through me, they're going to see that I'm a fraud, et cetera, no one knows this adventure framework better than you. You know, the story, it's always a story in progress. It's not a story that you've written. It's a story that's happening in real time that you're being a part of and following along with and giving input and steering. But, you know, you're more of a producer than you are a writer. But nobody else knows what's in the script. You're the only one who's seen the script. In fact, you're sort of like the director of a scene, just giving them the framework for the scene. You've got no idea where it's going to go. That means they have no idea where it's going to go. If they decide to go left and all you wrote was to go right, you know, ask yourself, is there a difference between the left and the right here? Does it matter which one it was? It's a technique I call moving the cheese. There isn't a reason that you can't move things around in the background. This is a great way to react to unexpected activity. It is very, very helpful in games that have more crunch. It can be difficult when you're playing a game like D&D or Pathfinder to summon out of thin air on 5 seconds a challenging encounter without having to pull out anything that's got stats and things like that you just can't memorize. It's tough to mechanically throw things together on the sly. A tip that I would give for that is to have flavorless devices nearby already written up. Have in your notebook, let's say you want to be prepared. I'll use D&D as the example, a D&D type game, and this is the type of adventure where fights are probably very likely, and it could be that they're going to go someplace that you hadn't planned for, but you do want them to have something to fight. You really have two options. You can take something that you planned and move it, again, because they don't know where it was supposed to be in the first place. There is no reason you can't pick up that thing and move it to somewhere else where you need it to be. The other thing you can do is you can have generic things nearby. You could have a generic challenge set up, something that is mechanically appropriate for a party of that size, and you decide what it looks like. When it comes down to it, all a monster is in a game is a bag of numbers. Really, you breathe all the life into it, all the life into what it's like, how it behaves, and all of that. That all comes from the GM. That comes from your creativity. If you're pulling it as is out of a monster manual, there's a lot of great guidance there. You know, they'll tell you, well, what does an orc look like? What do they behave like? What are their combat patterns? What are those all like? That's fine. That's all well and good. But there's nothing that prevents me from taking the stats of an orc and saying that, okay, this is actually warriors from this nation, a very primal nation. All I'm doing is reskinning. I have this thing that was useful for one thing. I'm putting it in a different costume. I can take orcs and put them in a human costume. I can take a shark and put it in a dinosaur costume. You know, the moves might have specific names. You can change the names of those moves. Does it really matter? Let's say I've got a fire-breathing dragon, right? But I need it to be something else. What's the difference between a cloud of fire and an explosion? You know, not much really. Just use it, describe it differently. We can reskin everything. Gordon here is talking about the DMPC. That is awful, 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 awful. Send that DM to me, and I'm going to have a vigorous conversation with them. So yeah, you can always be prepared for things to go wrong, because you can have your contingencies handy right there with you, because nobody else knows what they were in the first place. So you don't have to worry about something like that. That's a thing that you can prepare to improvise. It might seem like an oxymoron, but you can. Other games are easier to do this with, but I know that most people are playing a game like D&D, and that does pose an improvisational challenge. And I think that's a big part about why people get nervous, is there are specific challenges to different games that suit different things better than others. And game selection in the first place is an important part of the conversation that we have when we're setting up a new game. If you're worried about something going wrong, I got something wrong, we ended up in a space that just isn't working, everything's going to fall apart. There's nothing wrong with retroactive continuity. There is nothing morally or inherently wrong with saying like, okay, guys, this was really terrible. Let's go ahead and say that X didn't happen. We're going to delete this scene that we made and we're going to do something else because that was just terrible. It killed everybody's fun. There's no reason you can't do that. I like to go with this director-producer analogy because I think it's very helpful, because in a movie and a film, we can edit things, right? We could drop a scene. It doesn't change what the whole end product is. What we're trying to create as a table, we're creating the whole movie. And maybe there's things that don't make it into the final cut. Maybe there's things that we realize were crap. We say, okay, you know what? That's not part of the story. Or something doesn't make any sense and we need to change it to make it make sense. I'm going to take a cue from one of my favorite TV shows here. Is anybody familiar with the show Leverage? Is it who in the audience has never seen Leverage? Go ahead and click your no button there if you've never seen Leverage. Let's see how many. Okay, we got a couple who've never seen it. So Leverage, it's a heist TV show. Each episode is about a different heist, and it is basically an RPG. During the opening credits, when they're showing the actors, they introduce them not by character name, but by their role in the show. They're introduced as the hitter, the hacker, the thief, the grifter, and the mastermind. These are character classes. This is D&D, the TV show, but in heist modern day world form. And it's fantastic. But one of the plot devices that they use is the idea of a flashback. One of the best ideas I can think of that I saw in there was the mastermind is getting ready to take down the bad guy, get him thrown into jail. And in that office confrontation, the bad guy pulls out a gun that the mastermind did not know of. He was not prepared for this. Here we are in game. Oh my God, something has just happened that is terrible. Yes, there was a Leverage RPG. It's terrible. It could potentially ruin the game and end up with a TPK that we didn't want. We think that doesn't really make sense. This was just a stupid thing that happened. And all the other signs turn to this not going down this way. So what does the Leverage TV show do? Well, right as the guy's about to pull the trigger, it cuts to a flashback scene of the thief breaking into his office earlier that day and taking the bullets out of the gun. And then we jump back to present day. We made an adjustment that changes where we're going, but doesn't invalidate anything that was already done. And flashbacks are an extremely powerful tool in game, and I use them all the time for all kinds of different reasons. I'll use it as an opportunity to give players a chance to shine and add creativity. We could do a thing that's coming up, and I could just say, hey, Stacy, could you tell us about something that your character did earlier off screen that would have an impact on what we're about to do now? And just kind of give them a chance to contribute in a big way to the story in a very creative way that all came from them and not something that they were just feeding off of me as a GM. And Leverage, the game, incorporates flashbacks as a part of the core mechanics of the game. As Becky says here, they're also a big mechanic in Blades in the Dark. Excuse me. So lots of little things that you can do. And as I said, I talk about playing different games. These are techniques that I've learned just from looking at and reading other games. So not worrying about the fact that things might not go as planned. It's probably the biggest worry that all new GMs have is, oh my God, what am I going to do when they do something that I wasn't planning for? So alleviate that stress by knowing in advance they are going to do something that you didn't plan for. I've been GMing for 37 years. And I have rarely had a single session of any RPG in which the players didn't do something that I had not prepared for. It's just a fact of life. It goes with the territory. And if you expect it and know that it's something that's going to happen, and you develop for yourself like your own ways of addressing this. Like, what methods are you going to use to get around it? This one where I talk about moving the cheese is a very powerful one. It's very easy to do, especially when you've written adventure plots that are railroady. That's where you just move things around to where they need to be for you to have the story. I can make a railroad look like a sandbox, just taking advantage of the fact that the players don't know where everything is to start with. If there's a clue that they need to get about the robbery in the castle, and the story called for the prince's best friend who's been in a fight with him being involved in it somehow and them knowing something. But despite all your best efforts, the players have absolutely no interest in talking to this guy, and nothing that they've done so far has pointed them even in that direction. There's ways you can do that. You can get them a clue by sort of forcing it, sledgehammering that by having someone just come to them and insert them into it and kind of make them do it. The other way you can do, which is a little bit more natural, is take a look at, where are they interested? Where are they going? You need to get that piece of information to them. In the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter who gave it to them. In most cases, you'll find that it doesn't. It doesn't really actually matter. I can just move things around. I'm reskinning like I did the monster. I'm taking the thing that I need and I'm putting it on top of something else that's already there for me to make my life easier. This can result in a way of giving them a lot of room to make it feel sandboxy without completely putting you into nonstop improvisational mode. So moving the cheese is a great technique. If you really want to be bored to death by the concept, pick up the book Who Moved My Cheese. It's one of those the company made you read it type cubicle death publications, but I found a way to make it helpful. Note slipped under the door at night. Yeah, Sally, that's fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's a phrase I've once heard saying that sometimes players need a clue, sometimes they need a clue by four, and a note under the door is fine. You can actually use that as an opportunity. Right now, I have an opportunity to figure out, okay, who was it that did that, and can that become part of the story? Because maybe they're interested. Maybe they become obsessed with who was it that did that. That might seem a problem to you because you didn't think it out all the way, but I say that's an opportunity. They're now interested and emotionally invested in something in the story, and that's the best thing you can have happen. As soon as you know what it is that they like and what it is that they care about, now you have what basically amounts to a giant handle you can steer them around with because they're attached to something. And in a little bit, I'm going to talk about how powerful that is and why it happens. So preparing the right things. This may be what, to a new GM, this is what you think adventure game night preparation looks like. If it looks like this, you're trying too hard. So one of the first things I tell someone, you decide, okay, we're starting a new campaign. I'm going to be the GM. Wow, they're expecting the whole world of me. No one's expecting you to write the Forgotten Realms campaign book in the next 2 weeks. D. Stewart says that's exactly what it looks like. If it looks like this, take 2 steps back from the chalkboard and put down the chalk, sir. You need to drop it. Don't spend the next 6 months of your life detailing every single personality, aspect, building, and land feature of a 10 village radius around where the players are starting, plus 3 major cities and 6 different culture histories. 2 reasons for that. 1, it's overwhelming. 2, well, focus. We'll talk about focusing your OCD on something else. Have any advice? Well, ask really. Yes, I have, Angela. When I talk about, when I start to talk about player inception, ask me that question again. You could spend all your time doing that, and if that's something that you really, really enjoy, and you derive entertainment and enjoyment just from that creative process, by all means, go ahead and do that. But don't think that it is something that you need to do. There's a concept that comes from the Powered by the Apocalypse games called make maps, leave holes. Really, all you need to do for any of this stuff is have a skeleton. Have some space that's planned out, but also have openings to see where it's going to go. Moving the cheese can fill in those spots. I could have 3 villages all made up and they go to a 4th one that I didn't go to. Okay, so village number 4 is actually village number 3 with a different name, and I'll create village number 3 when I need to later on, if need be. But the reason I say don't spend too much time on it is that 90% of that stuff that you create, the players will never see. There just isn't a way for you to get all of that information out to them without boring them to death. I'll share a brief GM horror story with you right now. Playing over a friend's house, a GM I'd never played with before. He wanted to run an old school D&D type thing, but using the Savage Worlds game engine in order to do it. But this started off with, I'm not kidding, probably about 20 minutes of him reading us prose about the world. How many movies have you been able to sit through where that opening exposition to help you learn about the world lasts longer than 3 or 4 minutes and you've still been paying attention? You tune out. Nobody can listen for that long. The opening sequence of Lord of the Rings, the movies, is fantastic because the voice of Galadriel gives us almost the entire history of Middle-earth and the story of the ring up to that present day in the course of about a minute and a half. And that's kind of where you need to be. You can't dump stuff like that on people because they're going to tune out about 90 seconds into it. Because their ideas aren't being engaged. Their imagination's not being engaged, and people are going to glaze over quickly when there's no room for them to fill in the blanks themselves. That in mind, well, what about these prepaid? Joseph asked about prepaid adventures. If you've ever picked up an adventure module from Paizo, wow, there's so much information on there. It's so brought to life. It's incredibly well thought out and detailed and all of that. That information isn't for the players. That information is for you, the GM. You are the one who bought this product. You're the one who needs to be entertained by it. You need help. You need... Yeah, exactly. Kay says that minute and a half is the only reason she could watch the movie. She couldn't get through the books. So much of that information in that prepaid module is for you, the GM, for 2 reasons. 1, to entertain you, but 2, to give you a creative framework from which to improvise. They're helping you to understand this world, study it, if you will, but to have enough information that you can pull things out as needed and keep them consistent with the flavor and the style of that region of the world, of that town. If you have a broad understanding of that town and something unexpected happens, you're in a much better position to make something up or to vary from where you're starting there. But for most of that, it's all there for you. They don't intend for the players to know everything that's in that 60-page module. It's never going to happen. Bo says, let me tell you about the Silmarillion. Yes, the encyclopedia to Middle-earth. So yeah, don't spend all your time doing that. Don't spend your time pre-writing the story. Railroad, okay, because that's more of a functional sequence. You know, a thing needs to happen, a thing needs to happen, a thing needs to happen. I have an idea as to what's going to be the end, who the big bad guy is. We'll do what we need to do in order to kind of make that happen, but you absolutely have to give the players room to go where they need to go and do what they need to do. Crispy, what's your question? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I don't think I had one.
Oh, okay. You accidentally raised your hand. Okay.
Oh, Crispy. I'm sorry. I thought you said Christy.
Nope, no, Crispy. Okay, wrong button. Crispy. Okay, Katie Duffy.
Hi. You spoke with my husband earlier. My question with regards to all of this, I have DM'd twice, both in like very kind of short one-shot sort of situations. The reason for that being, I would love to do a larger campaign because I love storytelling, collaborative storytelling with friends. I love to see what they do, where they go, and whatnot. But my stumbling block is that every time I try to look at the rules book, it kind of makes me feel like I'm preparing for law school.
Okay.
It seems very overwhelming. There's a ton of information, and I've been fortunate to play with people who themselves have been DMs. They've played for a long time, and part of it is nerves. Part of it is also just making sure that I get it right, so they're not having to stop every 5 minutes and explain to me, no, here's how this works. So I don't know if you have any tips for helping people kind of get over that. Like, do you have to sit there and memorize the rule book from beginning to end, or how do you get around that?
Oh, absolutely not. So there are things good resources. that you can have. One is the rules lawyer at your table is probably the best resource you have, because they probably already know what the rule is. So, if there's a thing that you're, not totally comfortable about, you're not entirely sure how a thing is supposed to happen, you can go ahead and describe what it is that's going on, and then just pose the question to the rules layer and say, like, what's the rule that covers that? Uh, there's a line between doing the stopping and looking up the rule for everything is one extreme. Completely winging it and making everything up is on the other end. There's a whole wide range of space in between that is all the right answer. I don't think that spending all your game time looking up rules is a fun way to spend your time. So I look at right and wrong. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? The only answer that is a positive answer, yes, are you doing it wrong, is if no one's having fun. If everybody's having fun, you're doing okay. And as soon as things start to get in the way, as soon as the rules start to get in the way of the fun, when the rules are getting in the way of the story, the rules have got to go. If it means we just ignore something, we hand wave it and we keep going, that's fine. If we look at a rule and we just all decide, like, wow, this rule sucks. Like, this is in our way. We don't like it. And guess what? You just changed that rule. This table, so we don't think that rule's any good. We don't want to use it. Great, don't use it. The D&D police are not going to come to your house. I can't speak as for the Paizo police. The Paizo police might show up. The Paizo players are pretty hardcore that way. But when you do have a player who has the rule book memorized and challenges all the decisions, so you give them a job. Number one, let's make sure they get on the same page with Wheaton's Law, that they may know all the rules and they may want to challenge things, but they absolutely can't be a dick about it. But make them your helper. Every time something comes up, like, hit them up. Okay, such and such is doing this. They're behind cover. They're being fired upon. Eddie, what's the bonus for that? Give them a job, give them something to do. That's a great way to retask. So what was there? So I talked about moving the cheese, and just more than anything else, don't get yourself all worked up. This is a game. This is supposed to be fun. If you're not having fun, you got to change something. That's just all there is to it. If there's no fun at the table, we got to look at what we're doing and say, what do we need to change in order to make this fun? Because no one's here to have a bad time. There's nothing worse than playing in a bad RPG. When you sit down at the table and if the game just sucks, the GM sucks, the other players suck. When I'm doing that at a convention, I really don't have any shyness about me to very politely excuse myself. And once I hit that point where, like, this game is not for me, I'm not going to waste the next 3 hours of my convention time making myself and potentially other people miserable. So I'm at the point now where I've done that. I've sat through it in the past and punished myself that way. But where I'm at right now, you got 96 hours at Gencon. Don't waste them on a bad game that you're not having fun at. Just stop, say, hey, guys, I'm really sorry about this. The game's really not for me. I'm going to go ahead and excuse myself. Keep having a great time. I hope you guys have an awesome time. I'm very sorry, but I've got to go. That kind of thing. There's no need to make up excuses or anything like that. Just, be honest. But remember to have fun. I'm going to talk next about what kind of things you should do in preparing, but I'm going to ask Tour Guide what's up. What's going on, Tour Guide?
What I was going to say is, don't be afraid to make mistakes either. You're not going to get every rule correct. And so what I do in that case is, if the rule that I messed up, if correcting it is in the benefit of the players, we make the correction. If the correction would hurt the players, well, I made a mistake. We'll play it correctly next time.
Yeah, exactly. I wholeheartedly endorse that. When it comes down to rules questions in the game, the first thing that runs through my mind is, one, does it matter? That's really the first question I ask myself on anything. Does the answer to this question matter at all? If the answer is no, we just move on. If the answer is yes, you know what, maybe it does matter. Like, okay, does anybody know this at the table off the top of your head? No? All right, let's look for it for a second. I'm not going to take more than 60 seconds looking for a rule. If we can't find it in 60 seconds, we're just going to decide. I'll make a ruling. I'll make a call. We'll go ahead and make a note of what that thing was. We'll go look it up later and then reassess. After we looked it up, does this matter? No? Okay, then we're not even going to use that rule in our game. If it does matter, well, we now know what it was. there's an interesting mental thing that happens here. Because it had special attention called to it, you are more likely to remember that rule going forward than if you had just read it in passing. When you had an incident come up, you've now engaged it looking for a solution and had to do a thing where you deviated from it. It just becomes a more memorable thing, and that rule will stick in your brain much better than it would have otherwise. The distaste for Pathfinder, one of my favorite systems, understand potential downfalls of the system. Yeah, hey Carl, stick around after the seminar and I'll talk all about it. Real quick, we can't find a rule under 2 minutes. Yeah, exactly. I am allowed to do X in my game. Oh yeah, that's people can be awful sometimes. There's a lot. One of my favorite TV shows is a British comedy called The IT Crowd. It's about two nerds in the IT department of some company, and there's one scene where one of the nerds is just getting off the phone, looks at the other one, and he says to him, "People, what a bunch of bastards." And it's kind of an overall summary, I think, of humanity sometimes. But there's so many good people in RPGs. Don't let the bad ones push you off. So things that you should do. I encourage people to steal without mercy, steal without shame, steal without any hesitation ideas from other sources. Has everyone heard of the concept of a trope? Well, I'll just go ahead and explain anyway. A trope is a plot-based concept of a thing. My most hated trope is called the novice. The novice is a plot device used to explain something to the audience by using an unknowledgeable character on screen. This is often done in police procedurals, medical things, science fiction, something where someone will mention a concept and then someone else on scene who really should know what this is already asks about it. You know, Smurflin generator, it's broken. And then, the engineer goes, Smurflin generator. And then someone explains it. I hate this one because I feel like it's somewhat insulting to the audience. But there's so many of them. Neo's 90 plus questions in the Matrix. Yeah. Audience expositionary explanation using a character as a conduit. It can be done well. It can be done very sloppily. So check out tvtropes.com. I'll warn you in advance, this could suck you into a 14-hour internet black hole of clicking from item to item to item to item. But as you go through reading all those tropes, you're going to recognize that so many different books, TV shows, movies that you've seen that are these exact things that they're talking about. And there's a reason for that. And it's that at this evolution in human culture and in our language, pretty much every possible trope that could be created has already been done. And almost everything that we see is a variation based on that. Think of some great example someone gave yesterday on here is the movie The Lion King. Everybody's probably seen The Lion King, right? Have you read Hamlet? Well, you have. It was just called The Lion King. The Lion King is the story of Hamlet. How many different movies have you seen that are basically Romeo and Juliet? It's over and over and over and over again. You see these things repeated. So don't be afraid to use those because pretty much every other writer out there is using them as well. And let's be realistic, none of us is Stephen King or George R.R. Martin. Yeah, exactly. 10 Things I Hate About You is exactly Taming of the Shrew. In fact, you can probably find any kind of well-doing movie and find the William Shakespeare play that it's based on. So yeah, we're not George R.R. Martin. We're not J.R.R. Tolkien. We're not insert whatever world famous author. None of us are that talented at writing that we're going to all of a sudden invent some new trope. If you happen to do it, great. Don't stress and pressure yourself to do it because there's so much stuff out there there's nothing wrong with using it. Even just narrative theory. You take a look at Star Wars. Star Wars is a creation of what's known as the hero's journey. It follows a very specific plot arc of things that are going to happen to any hero on a hero's journey. So read lots of systems, read lots of fiction, read everything because the most original thing in the last 5 years is Hamlet. Yeah, pretty much. And that's actually a case of life imitating art, imitating life, imitating art, because the events of it are so human that they repeat as well all throughout. So even then. So reading fiction, it improves your vocabulary. It improves your ability to speak improvisationally without your word selection becoming repetitive, saying the same things over and over and over again. reading other systems gives you different ideas and angles as to how RPGs can solve different problems. When we're telling these stories, quasi improvised stories at the table, certain points of conflict are going to arise, and these types of conflict are pretty much universal in all types of games. How does a specific game address that type of conflict? I'm loving the chat right now. Rowena says, I would play an RPG written by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Just saying. That'd be cool. I've learned so much about, or the way IGM has developed so much from reading and playing so many different systems. I pull things from different systems all the time. Know the rules, but know the rules within reason. Don't stress out about having everything memorized. Don't be afraid to bend or break the rules if needed. Gary Gygax, the creator of D&D, one of the most notoriously rules-bound lawyers, rule lawyer game masters of all time. In his foreword of the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's this statement. The secret the players don't need to know is we don't need the rules. That's kind of a profound statement. The rules are there to help you, but they're not there to get in the way. Like he may have taken the approach on that as in like we should just kill the bastards if we want to. I disagree with him on that front, but same general philosophy on rules. They're a tool. They're not the purpose of the game. They're a tool for telling the story. So one of the more important things you can do at the table, and this will come in with some other things I'm going to talk about, is paying attention. Don't be so inside your head. You're just thinking about your story. You're thinking about the rules, worried about this, worried about that. You're missing what's going on at the table because your eyes and your ears are the two most powerful tools you have. They are more helpful than your ability to improvise. They are more helpful than your ability to be creative. Just listening to what's going on tells you so much about what's going on in the game. When people start to become bored, that's communication. They're not intentionally communicating to you. It's very rare, I think, that someone is passive aggressively stacking dice on the table. They're stacking dice on the table because they're bored and they haven't really realized it yet, and they're doing something to engage their mind. Don't receive that as an insult. Receive that as a communication signal. Like, oh, geez, Johnny's bored. Okay. So we see that, take it as a message. Imagine if people at the table started saying like, hey, we're kind of losing interest in this. That's the cue to you to say, all right, let's change things up a little bit. Let's make something happen. Let's inject some interest. And two of the best ways to do that, if you were a traditional Pathfinder D&D type player, drop a die on your side of the screen. That will absolutely summon attention. It's like a bell for Pavlov's dogs. All role players will respond to it instantaneously. They could probably have headphones on, yet somehow they will hear the clattering of dice on the DM's side of the screen, and you will instantaneously have their attention. Don't lose that opportunity. You've got their attention back. What I like to do is to engage them creatively. Ask a question. Take a player who looks bored right now, suck them in by asking them a question. All kinds of questions you can ask. Oh, when the phone comes out, like I want to set the table on fire. That's the dice stacking of the modern era is the phone. Yeah, I don't like to have a whole lot in the way of table rules, but I do ask for no phones at the table. Yeah, absolutely. Dropping die on the GM says building paranoia. Yeah, building tension. If I have time after the session, we can talk about physical spacing dynamics. Not really room for it in this session. Which slide am I on here? Okay. So we're asking all these questions about rules. What do I do if I get a rule wrong? I say, stop worrying about it. You are going to get rules wrong. You are going to make a mistake. This has come into focus for me in the last couple of years as I became a soccer referee. I've had to come to grips with the fact that I am going to make mistakes. I am going to miss a call. I am not going to see something and I'm either not going to call a foul that took place or I'm going to have a bad angle and I'm going to call a foul on something that wasn't. I have to accept that. That's just real life. I'm not going to get them all right. I might even see something and interpret it wrong. I may make the wrong decision. These are all things that aren't just possibilities that they're going to happen. They are going to happen. So understand that you are going to make mistakes. You're going to mess up rules. I'm going to go right back to the first thing I said about rules. Who cares? Is it ruining anyone else's life that you made a mistake on a rule? No, it's we've got pieces of paper and plastic and dice on the table. That's the realm that we're talking about here. So mistakes made in good faith are okay. They help us learn. Being a jerk leads to mistakes made in bad faith, which is also known as being mean or violating Wheaton's law. That's not okay. But as long as you have the right attitude, your motivations are in the right place, you make mistakes, it's okay. How much did that rule really matter in the grand scheme of things? Don't waste time with it. We can fix it, get it right next time, and we just move on because we're here to tell a story together. Question. iPads, phones, other electronics to keep their books, character sheets on. I don't like it. I have a tendency, depending on the game, I might use a computer to keep my notes or to hold some maps on or anything like that, but I run a very analog table. I don't keep a whole lot of notes. I can pretty much run an entire night's worth of work on 2 pages of notes and a stack of index cards. But I understand people want that crutch, but I'd rather them not have it. You don't need an iPad. You don't need it at the table. That's not for everybody. I'm sure that everyone has their own thing. Lots of people use apps for running their characters and things like that. It's all just going to boil down to how does it affect the table? How is it impacting your game? If it's having a negative impact on your group's table, we need to address that and decide what is the best way for us to do it. And so much stuff just comes down to having a conversation. It really does. So, don't kill all that time on the rules. Yeah, Tim, I am going to talk about those notes and index cards shortly. I do want to get serious for a minute. So here's your big psychology moment of being okay and relaxing as a GM. This whole thing is going to happen. We're all going to meet in a tavern as complete strangers and then go off and do things that require incredible amounts of trust with each other. It's an absurd concept, right? No one is ever going to do that. You're not going to hook up with a bunch of people you met in a bar and then go rob the US Mint with people you've never known before. That's just not going to happen. So I'm setting the stage here for the idea of what we're about to do is absurd. We haven't even made our characters yet, but we're sitting down with the pretext. Here's what's about to happen. You and your friends, many of whom are likely grown adults, you're about to sit around a table with some pencils, pens, papers, iPads, and dice or whatever, and you're going to pretend to be elves, pirates, ninjas, wizards, and dragons and crap. Think about how ridiculous that statement is. It's utterly absurd. You are about to do a ridiculous thing. You're about to do a thing that you did when you were 5 years old. And this is tragic that adults seem to lose that imagination as we get older. Kids have the best imaginations. Kids are the best role players out there. They do it naturally. They do it without even thinking about it. You're playing pretend. You're going to play pretend, and you're sitting here, you're getting worried about, what if I do it wrong? No, we're sitting here, we're going to play a pretend. It's so easy. It's so fun. It's ridiculous. Take a deep breath, realize how silly this whole concept, this whole enterprise is in the first place. That should help you to be able to relax and forget about what you were even worried about in the first place. Okay, so here's my moment of deadly seriousness. I want to bring a point. This might not pertain to everybody, but this is a space where things can really go wrong and people can be hurt. RPGs are a very different type of game. No one has conversations with their friends about how to dispose of geriatric green humanoids when you're playing Monopoly. No one places mind control over another player during a game of canasta, for the most part, usually. RPGs have a different level of connection and intimacy with us and the people around us at the table. As adults, we are more guarded, especially when it comes about the ideas of creativity, embarrassing ourselves, and we have a lot of life experience, not all of which has been pleasant. Because we're entering into a space of imagination, we're opening ourselves and being vulnerable to each other in a small space. These may be strangers, these may be people you've known for a very long time, but regardless, we want all of this to always be a positive experience. So with that in mind, we need to talk about content. What are we going to have in this game? Does this game include things like dealing with helpless enemies? How do we feel about that? What do we think about that? the concepts of good and evil in our game? Are they absolute things where there's nothing wrong with, you know, the genocide of kobolds just because they are evil? That's the concept and that's it. Do we want to have romantic content in our game? There's lots of different things that can make people uncomfortable in different ways. And there's really nothing worse than inadvertently stumbling into that space and accidentally trampling all over some, you know, really deep emotional feelings that one of your friends at the table has. So it's something that should be addressed early on. It doesn't have to be as serious as the guy here in Meet the Parents. I'm watching you. So we can start with just what's the rating? What's our game rated? Is this a PG game? Is this an R game? Is this an NC-17 game? Where are we at with this? That helps us with the broad strokes right away. We may need to get more detailed and say what's in bounds, what's out of bounds. This concept of lines and veils. What are some concepts in the game that we are just not going to include? And everybody needs to have a voice in this. For me, I have some trauma in my past, and you know, drug use is a big problem for me. And so as a result, games that I'm doing, I draw a line on drug use. Drug use is more of a veil. The idea of a veil is that, okay, this is something that may come up, but we're not going to go into detail on it. We're not going to role play out a scene in a game that I'm at that's about drug use because of my own personal issues with it. I'm allowing it, say, okay, I can be okay with this being in our game space, but I'm not okay if we go into it. So we draw a veil on that. When that comes up in the game, we just sort of pull the curtain on it. We fade out on the scene. We can imply that it happens, but we don't need to see it on screen. And that's kind of the concept of a veil. The concept of a line, for me, domestic abuse against children is something that I absolutely can't tolerate. It's something from my own past, and it's not a good thing. You don't want somebody from your game, and when I say your, I'm talking about you, your player, the table that you sit at. If somebody has had some kind of a traumatic situation in their life and you accidentally trample on that in the middle of a game, you can send someone into a complete PTSD response. This is never going to happen when you're playing Yahtzee. This is never going to happen when you're playing dominoes or Uno or something like that. But because of the space that we're in, these are things that can actually happen. And think about how bad you would feel if you accidentally did that to a friend or even a complete stranger. It's awful, and it's something that's so easy to avoid. The ultimate way to avoid this is a thing called the X card. I take an index card, I put an X on it, and it goes in the middle of the table. And I request, as a condition of sitting down at this table, that we all agree to the following: that if someone indicates the X card by pointing at it, tapping it, however they need to indicate that X card, whatever it was we were talking about, we hit an absolute emergency brake, no questions asked. So if you as a player are getting uncomfortable with the direction something's going and this is danger territory for you, you just touch that index card, touch the X card. Everyone at the table says, okay, cool, stop. That's not happening. This is something else that's going to happen. We stop the car, we back it up a little bit, make a turn, and then keep going. There is never a requirement to explain why. You don't have to justify your usage of the X card. That X card there is just the ultimate line of defense that does two things. It can help us all feel safe, that in the event that something goes wrong, we have an out. Two, we have an out that no one's going to judge us for. And three, it does enable us to get into some more difficult space, some edgy space. We can push our boundary a little bit when we know that we have a very easy escape from it. So, excuse me. Sorry about that. A common line and veil thing is sexual or romantic content between players and NPCs, players and players, whatever. Very common for people to be uncomfortable with role playing that out. So we just call it a veil, right? We say, okay, that's fine. This is part of these stories. We're just not going in detail with it because nobody's comfortable with it, or one person's uncomfortable with it, or whatever. So I'm just real quick going to look at these other cards. Player that you know might be hesitant to explicitly state that. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's difficult to have complete anonymity for anyone to give another person. You could have just people put stuff, throw it into a hat. If you've got anything, ask everyone to throw a piece of paper into the hat. And if there's nothing on it, that's fine. If there's something on it, that's fine too. Yeah, exactly. That's not the kind of game we're playing. Have I had an X card come up? I've hit an X card in a game once, a game that I was facilitating a game of Fiasco, and it started to go to that children violence place, and I hit that as soon as I saw it starting to go in that direction. I hit the card right away, and it never got far enough down there for it to be a problem. And we turned it around so early that it just never even became a plot thread, which is great. There's lots of different safety tools out there. I think that the X card is the one I use at conventions the most because it is the big red super safety button. It leaves, there's no ambiguity that, okay, fine, we're not going there. We're not even going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Next, keep going. We're going to have a good time. So that's why I use that. And so there's my little PSA on why RPGs are different and what we need to do about it. So again, this is still before session 0. Let's decide what game are we playing. And I don't mean what rules system. I mean, are we playing Dungeons and Wizards and shit? Are we playing murder hobos? Are we playing superheroes saving the day? Are we playing misunderstood villains? Are we playing, criminals? That sort of thing. Yeah, exactly, Karen. That Consent in Gaming PDF from Monty Cook Games. That's a good one. So Samantha, hit me up. Oh, you already have the drive. Okay, I was going to add that link to the thing. So you're deciding what is the nature of the game we're playing. What are we trying to get out of this? Is the purpose of our group to get together and kill things and take their stuff? Because that's just, I have a stressful job and I just need to let off steam. And having everybody on the same page about this is really important, and it can avoid a lot of table problems later if we all decide what game are we going to play. This also helps you decide what's the right rules to use for it. If we're doing deep political intrigue, D&D might not be the right rule system for that. If we're doing something with extreme high, we want to tell a story about people dying and getting killed, and we want to be the people who die and getting killed, and that is that's a part of this game. A gaming system that involves detailed character creation is probably not the right one for you to use. And yes, Angela, are we going to do PvP? Understand the nature of that. Is that something that we want in our game? In a moment, I will go ahead and give you a great example of that from one of my own games. How are we playing it? Here's the conversation about iPads and things like that. What does our environment look like? How are we executing on this? What are our expectations for the how we play this game? And then as we get into player characters and developing that, we need to know, who are they? Are these a bunch of randos that meet in a bar? If so, we got to work on that and find out what makes that interesting. Are they the law enforcement for a kingdom? Are they space explorers? Get that broad stroke of who are these people? Are they the representatives of individual nations getting ready to go on a quest together because the world's going to end if they don't? That's the plot of Lord of the Rings. Why are they here? What are they doing? When you know those two questions, that really leads you into your session 0 of character creation. And I want to make a point here. This is probably the biggest missed opportunity on the planet for creating stories that the players are interested in, making things organic, and helping smooth things at the table. In any game that's going to last more than a session or two, I really don't want anybody to create a character on their own. I don't want characters created in a vacuum. I want characters created together at the same time. And there's a specific technique that I use for it. I share this with you. It's a little bit detailed, but I think it's such a powerful technique. I just want everyone to have access to it and to know about it. I learned this one from a couple of different instances of the games based on the Fate engine. I use this in every game that I'm playing that will involve characters that go from multiple sessions. It's a little group writing exercise. Just need a piece of paper, pencil, everyone together, or do it in chat room or whatever online. And we're going to write down 5 short paragraphs about our characters, and we do them one at a time, and we share them one at a time. Step 1 is upbringing. So players will write down 3, 4, 5 sentences, whatever, about their character's upbringing. What was their family like? Where did they grow up? What was that environment like? Tell us a little bit about that. Get us a feel for who's your character as a kid. There's a process that comes out of that that's specific for Fate called developing aspects, where you take that story and you kind of summarize it with a word or phrase. So if talk about the childhood being something where they were always precocious and getting into trouble, didn't like to listen to authority, maybe an aspect that comes out of that is just the word independent, or strong-headed, or it could be a phrase, mama's boy, something like that. Those are used as part of the mechanics in games based on fate. They're called aspects. I like players to do them anyway, even in a game like D&D. These little tiny inspired phrases or words that come out of a detailed paragraph become great, easy things to remember to help you role play your character well. So that was paragraph 1. Paragraph 2 is tell us the short story here, 4 or 5 sentences, whatever, about how did your character become the career that they're on? How did they end up on this career path? How did Regdar become a warrior? How did Zanzibar become a wizard? How did Ripley end up working for this mining company, traveling around the galaxy? That kind of thing. Give us a quick, short thing on that. And again, pull out 2 little aspects of that because they're just such good, useful role-playing tools. And after you do each of these paragraphs, you read them out loud. You share them with each other so everyone sees the other characters developing. Now we start tying things together and connecting these characters with step 3. Step 3 is tell us about an extremely important, pivotal moment in your character's life, maybe something that changed them or really set them on a new trajectory, an influential, important moment. Tell us about that. And this moment involves the character seated to your left. This really starts to ramp up the cool here because you're getting carte blanche to write someone else into your story. Be respectful of this because someone else is writing you into their story. Don't be a dick, right? But it's a great opportunity for you to connect your character to another character, and someone else is connecting their character to yours. So we're already starting to develop not just a check mark bond of we were in the army together. Some games have a framework for you to do that, and it's great that they have it. This is a more detailed version of it. But so we do that same thing, 3 to 5 sentences, pick out a couple of little aspects, and we share that paragraph. So now the person next to us is finding out how they are a part of our story. Yes, it will, Fenster. It will. Paragraph 4 is the flip side of that. Your character is now going to give us their point of view on the incident that they were just involved in. So we get that same pivotal, important moment in one person's life, but told from 2 different points of view. And I think it's a really cool back and forth on that. I've seen some really interesting things come out of it. And I'll use that to segue into the idea of PvP. So we had a player who decided that their character was supposed to be the protector of the character to their left and had been following them for a long time. There was a massive fire that the protectee was caught in, and the protector was unable to save them from it, and they ended up burned very badly. The character survived and is in the campaign, but this is a horrifying moment from their past. When they did the flip side about the protector, the protectee decided that they thought that the one protecting them was the one who set the fire. So we now have 2 completely oppositional views on the same event. One of the players thinks that the other player tried to kill them at one point. So that develops this dynamic that needs to be addressed very carefully because this treads on PvP waters. The best example of PvP that I've experienced was myself and another friend at the table during one of the few games that I was a player in. We decided that it would be great for the story if our characters were rivals who did not like each other. This worked out great. It made the story much more fun because we didn't put it in the way of the game. We made sure that all of our antics were always done with the intent of adding depth to the story, making things interesting, making things fun for people, and exploring the dynamics of 2 people who hate each other, forced to work together. But we never let that get in the way of everyone else's fun. And so if you're doing things intentionally, which we were, nothing my character ever did to Alan's character would ever piss off Alan. Nothing Alan did to Bob's character would piss off Bob, because this was something we were doing intentionally together. We were doing it on purpose, and so we were able to tailor it to what we needed. There's questions. All right, so we've done character creation. We're at the table. I've got this, little stack of notes, whatever it is I'm going to use to run the game by. Maybe I'm running a pre-published module or whatever. These are things that I'm going to have with me at all times. Number one is a list. This is the single most important pre-written thing that I have on my side of the screen. And I don't always use a screen, but I always have it with me. And these are lists of names. That's the first list I have. First names, last names, monikers, epithets, things like that. Have it right there within easy view, such that you can look at it and instantaneously pull a name out of thin air. That's something that a lot of people struggle with when put on the spot. Give me a name. Your tendency might be to just come up with a name that's like Steve, and it's not very interesting and it was very reflexive, but it wasn't interesting and it wasn't reflexive because you weren't prepared for it. If you have a list, you are prepared for it, and you can immediately snatch a name and respond. Think about this. Player's party is traveling down a trail at night, and as some flavor, you introduce a fellow traveler going the other way. You just intended that to be flavor text in passing. The players, however, are interested in this character for some reason who doesn't even have a name. And they ask you what his name is. When you instantaneously pull out a real name, and especially if it's a fantasy world, and you pop out a fantasy name on no notice, they're going to think that this person's important, or at the very least that this person has the potential to be important. They're not left with an automatic response of this is nothing, we can ignore it. They can engage it or not at their leisure, but they've not been given a clear communication that this isn't something. So they're being given permission, really, to interact with this character. The next out of that, after the name, becomes some description. So this can go in with the other lists: sights, smells, sounds, random things, lists of all kinds of stuff. So that when I need a thing off the top of my head, I've already got a list of things that I can pick from. It's an ounce of prevention for 6 metric tons of cure. Index cards. Information is going to go on index cards. As soon as they show interest in something, grab an index card, jot it down on there, especially NPCs. I use index cards for everything. The moment I name an NPC and they show any kind of interest in it, if they ignore them, absolutely, I'll go ahead and toss it. But if they engage in some kind of a conversation, I'm going to go ahead and jot that NPC's name down on an index card, and I'm going to keep that index card forever. And here's what's going to go on the index card. This is where I'm going to talk about player inception. This has to do with memory and creativity. And I will say this, that something that you create in your mind will always be more memorable to you than anything that I described to you. So the key is, in order to create a vivid image of someone, I need to give you something, but I can't give you everything. So let's talk about this traveler coming down the road. His name is Arthur McCawthorne, and players ask what he looks like. Well, it's dark. He's sitting atop the wagon. He's wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat. Has a very long face, and as he shifts in the seat, you can hear his bones creaking. So what I want everybody to do now is stop. Picture that in your head. Picture that scene. Picture that guy, Arthur McCawthorne. Give it the picture. Now take a step back from yourself and realize how much of that picture that you just created came from what I said, and how much of it was your brain filling in the rest. I think you'll find that your brain filled in the vast majority of what's there, because I didn't give you much to go on. I gave you something. I gave you a stick figure, and you dressed the stick figure and fleshed it out. If tomorrow you thought of Gandalf, see, you had something in your head to put around it. But the idea, you know what Gandalf looks like, but you assign Gandalf to him. There's all different ways that it can come from. Amish gentlemen, yeah. So you see, everybody's going to have their own little thing, and that's what makes this so powerful. Is all I need to have written down is what I just said. The rest of the details, I'm just looking at my name. So Angela, your image of Arthur McCawthorne may be different than Becky's image of Arthur McCawthorne, but they're based in the same thing, and so we can have there's a lingua franca that we all have to refer to him while it's still being original for each of us. If I were to ask each of you to draw a picture, those two pictures would be different, but everybody at the table would probably say, look at each of them and say, yeah, that's Arthur McCawthorne. I pictured him a little differently, but so this is what we call the inception. When the player is the creator of the thought, Xcrawl is still a thing out there. If I remember, I can try to find a link for it for you. Because that idea was created in the player's mind, it will be more powerful, it will be more memorable, they'll be able to attach it to it and come back to it later. It also makes players more emotionally invested in what's happening. You can't help but care more about something you created than something that I created. And so this is a way of me getting you to have your hook onto something, which you may choose to pursue, you may choose to not pursue. It doesn't really matter, but it's there and it's powerful. These are great ways to, when you have things you need to communicate to the players, you need to do it through NPCs. The more interested they are in an NPC, the more fleshed out that NPC becomes, not because you rattled off all kinds of stuff about them, but because the players have done it themselves. They just become such a better tool for doing it because they're just naturally going to gravitate toward that. And you can use that concept for anything, for plot ideas, for buildings, for anything out there. I just call it 3 things. If I tell you 3 things about a thing, that gives you enough to start building, but not enough to complete it, and you complete it on your own and the magic happens. This is also a variation of that technique where I called make maps, leave holes. Think of that just from a philosophical standpoint. I draw a little bit of it, but I leave room. Always leave room for other people to create. So having that, that's the biggest tool on my belt. My 3 things concept including a list and my pile of index cards. I run extremely improvisational stories, and these are the things that enable me to do it. So let me give you advice on your first game and some things to do during the game. Number 1, get a good night's sleep. GMing is a mentally tasking event. It's emotionally, creatively, and intellectually challenging. You need your brain functioning at tip-top shape. So prep for a game the same way you would any other mentally challenging event. Like a test, but with less stress than a test, because this is not a test, this is fun. But just make sure your brain's ready to go in tip-top shape. If you're an adult, don't get drunk, be sober. Oh, thank you, Rowena. Thank you for coming. You be sober. If you want to have, a drink or whatever, I just say having a drink is fine. Just don't be drunk and try to GM. Don't GM and drink. Having a GM that hasn't slept in 28 hours and just drove in from 10 hours away, yeah, this probably wasn't a very great game. Or maybe it was a great game, but probably for not the right reasons. Yeah, the Bob Ross reference here, tour guide says, there's no mistakes here, just happy little accidents. And sometimes those mistakes become the most memorable things out there. I talked about listening to the players. See what's happening out there. They're telling you what they're interested in. Look at their posture, look at their interest level. Listen to their conversations. What are they talking about? The players are in a constant state of unintentional communication to you as the GM. All you have to do is be aware of it. I think once you become aware of that fact, it's going to open up a lot for you. You never thought to really listen to what they're doing. If you're lost behind the screen, you can't hear it. But once you start hearing it, now it's going to open up a lot of power for you because it enables you to tap off their ideas. So remember what I said about that player idea inception. When you can incorporate ideas that they have into the story, it invests them deeper into the story because they feel ownership of it. They feel a connection to it. Collaborative GMing, allowing players to add things to the story. Kind of an open concept at games that I run is players are welcome to add to the story, add details to the scene. I don't need to flesh out everything about the throne room. Player decides that there's a giant tapestry over there. Of course there's a giant tapestry over there, right? Was the king's chair raised on a dais? I didn't say that, but player throws that in there. Says, well, I approach the king, and as I come before the dais, I only move up the first step, right? I want players to be able to add details like that because there's so much detail that can be added that doesn't really have any appreciable impact on what's going to happen. If it does have impact, it's impact on the story and not necessarily the mechanics or the balance of the game. It all goes to keeping things interesting. Player says they grab something grab something off the table that I didn't say was there. You know, they're sneaking to a warehouse, caught off guard. There's a desk nearby. I want a player at the table to be able to say, you know what, I grabbed the stapler and whip it at Vinny the Fish's head. Did we say there was a stapler on there? No. Is it reasonable that there was a stapler on there? Of course there is, right? If it makes sense, do it. The player, I take notes furiously. DM, not enough time. Correct. Index cards. Index cards, Fenster, baby. If it became important, and if it became important enough that someone seemed to care about it, a couple of words go down on an index card. And really, you only need 3 things for yourself to help you remember it. When we hit a foregone conclusion, one of the most boring things in the world is a combat encounter that drags on for 30 rounds too long. When we knew 30 rounds ago that we were going to win this encounter, when we hit that point, I'll typically just pick a player and say, hey, tell us the story of how this battle ends. We all know where it's going. We just want to hear the details. And the details are much more interesting than the next 36 dice rolls that we make. So just killing time. We already know what's going to happen. Have the players collaborate. Group, tell us a story. What happens with your character as you trudge through this? You know, what do they do? How does it end up? What does this whole thing look like? You players, tell me the story of the rest of this battle. People love when they have the opportunity to do that. Another hugely powerful tool is to ask questions. This is where some of my GM laziness really comes in. A great example of how to create an instant adventure. If we were in person, I would do this very quickly and have you responding with me, but I'll give examples. I've got a case. I need some idea of something to go on. Things have just drawn to a close. I know that they're visiting the Grand Vizier today. So let's go do that slide. Okay, they're in the Grand Vizier's his audience chamber. The Vizier comes in. He is exhausted looking. His eyes are droopy. He's got bags under his eyes. He's very sluggish as he comes up to stand behind or beside the throne. And we wait a very long period of time before the queen is able to come in. She looks somewhat chipper, sits down, very pleased with herself, has a pleasant smile for you characters that are out there. But the Vizier is giving stink eye. Like, he's got that evil eye stare. Who is he staring at? Which one of you is he staring at? Now, before you think that this might be a problem and no one is going to say me, I can tell you you're wrong. Absolutely, someone at the table is going to see this and go like, oh yeah, it's awesome. The Vizier is mad at me. I want him to be mad at me. Okay. A couple ways you can go with this. You can start creating here, or you can continue that improvisational aspect of it and ask that player, well, why is he mad at you? What did you do? A spin that I like to take on is I'll ask a different player, like, what did Maria do? Why is the Vizier so angry with her? You tell me. And what I've found over the years is that all you got to do is just start letting out rope. Give the players rope, and they will create the most interesting predicaments to put themselves in that then you can referee. You can help guide, create, flesh out, but take advantage of the biggest creative resource that's at the table, and that is the other people. Right? You can weave a much better, much more memorable, enjoyable, and more easily created story when you're tapping into the creativity of other people as well. So, listen to questions that the players are wondering. If they're wondering something, it'd be fantastic if you have an answer for it. So that, like I said, that nonstop communication that players are always doing, that maybe it's something you knew about before. Maybe my calling your attention to it is just the one little push you needed to take advantage of that. So I like to say that everything that I learned about GMing, I learned from reading Apocalypse World, which was a very fundamental shift in my GMing, my thoughts on GMing. Apocalypse World and Dungeon World, I read those, and me finishing the GM section of those books, I was like Neo after having Kung Fu injected into his brain. Like, my eyes opened up and it was like, whoa. The way that GMing was explained in these two games, I'm not overstating it. It fundamentally changed the way I think about GMing. I can't give a high enough recommendation to Apocalypse World, Dungeon World, and pretty much all the other Powered by the Apocalypse games. I've not read all of them, but I know that the GMing sections of Apocalypse World and Dungeon World are some of the best advice you can read anywhere. They take GMing. So if you were to describe to me, what is it that a good GM does? What makes them a good GM? What are the things that they're doing at the table? They're doing this. This is what Apocalypse World and Dungeon World call the agenda. This is a roadmap / instruction manual on being a good GM. If in the game you are doing these things, someone sitting back and watching it would say, well, they're a good GM. They're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this. They're not comparing it to a checklist. This just happens to be the best codified list of good GM behaviors that I've ever seen collected in one place. And this is part of the GM rules of Apocalypse World and Dungeon World. Just really walk you through, what do you do? Do this. And the GM sections of those books give you even more kind of concrete ways of doing this. They provide a really good framework for these. All right, so we are approaching the top of the hour. I do have time after this to hang around for a little bit and talk and do whatnot. If anybody wants to continue, ask some questions. I'm going to take live questions right now, and then after those are all done, I'm going to go ahead and answer the questions that were asked through the messaging. And they're in the recording, people will be able to come back to that. But if anybody has any questions right now here in the real live time, I will take those at this time. This is our Q&A Dear Abby session of the seminar. Angela, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I asked earlier and then I forgot to ask you during the appropriate time. We were talking about not fleshing out too much because a lot of it's not going to come up. I play with a person who I know will ask very detailed questions. Like, we had an hour-long debate about the direction our river flowed once.
Okay.
And like, he's not doing it to be a jerk. He just is genuinely curious. How would I even try to prepare for someone I know is going to ask me questions I would never have thought of?
I love that player.
I know.
Because remember the part where I just talked about shared creativity?
Yeah.
Does it matter to you which way the river goes?
It mattered in that situation because we had already established that something flowed this way.
Okay.
And then we were going to be moving down the river to do this other thing. And he was like, well, rivers don't flow that way because there's a mountain here and there's an ocean here. And we were just like, bro, I don't know how rivers work.
Okay. So two ways you can go. First question that I would hit him with, is this a fantasy world? Or is this like a hyper realistic session?
This was a fantasy world.
Oh, it's a fantasy world?
Yeah.
So, he says that rivers don't work that way. That's what you go, huh? That's weird. You notice that. Leave that up in the air.
Okay.
This guy now has got a full-blown conspiracy theory in his head that he's going to be bringing up over and over and over and over again. You just created an entire plot thread.
Okay.
That this player is going to be interested in. Where are you going to go with that? I don't know yet, but asking them for input, giving them some control over it, saying like, it did do that in that section. Why do you think that is? Take the answer and go with it. A ridiculous example of this, a Dungeon World game I was running, a small group of people. This is a group of people that know the way that I GM and know that I definitely take interesting ideas that happen spontaneously and incorporate them as part of the game world. I'll take things that players state and make it part of canon for that game world. Case in point, fighting kobolds in a cave. Something came up. I don't remember the exact situation, but it had to do with footwear, maybe the boots that someone was wearing, and kobolds ended up running away as part of that. And someone made the throwaway comment that, everybody knows that kobolds are scared to death of footwear. I just stopped for a minute. I'm like, that's a silly sentence. We all laughed. And then as the laughter ended, my response was just, yes, they are. What happened? What happened in kobold history? What happened in this tribe's history that they now have this abject instilled fear that they don't even understand anymore of things covering feet? And, have a little conversation about that. The whole universe that we're in just got more interesting to everybody. It was something they got to add into it, and it became a really a fun, cool thing to explore. So thanks, Angela. Chris Handy-Kraus.
Hello. First, thank you for a fantastic seminar. It has been wonderful. All of these stories and tips have been fantastic. My question is, do you have any advice for running small sessions? It will probably be my husband and I playing. I will be GMing for him. And I love the Duets series. Are there any other systems out there or game, campaigns that you can think of that kind of specialize in small, like GM and one player situation?
That's always a tough one. That's a resource that I do need to familiarize myself more with, and finding specific, like, stuff designed for one player. Games that are more mechanical in nature, I think, are harder to do this with, because games that are more mechanical in nature tend to have certain assumptions made. Yeah, sure, you can play D&D with 2 people, but really D&D as a function kind of expects there to be the trope roles, right? The fighter, the healer, the support utility one, and the sneaky one, right? There's kind of that expectation that's built in, and the game, kind of, it doesn't totally crumble, but it struggles to stand on its own mechanically without those things. Thank you, Devin, for Gumshoe. Gumshoe is a game system that was designed for the purpose of doing mysteries. If you ever played Call of Cthulhu and hit a place where you're smacking your head off a wall because you failed a skill roll and you can't find out what the clue is, Gumshoe was created to solve that problem. It's a system in which people can't not get clues that are required. There's optional clues, but stuff that's required to progress through the story is not dependent on the randomness of dice. It's more based on, did you look for the clue? Did you look for the clue in the right way? If you're a forensic pathologist in a Gumshoe game and you are examining a body, there's no skill roll for you to figure out the cause of death, because you are a forensic pathologist and you're doing an autopsy. So that's a great way in which kind of get around specific skill distribution, things like that. That's just an example of Gumshoe. My recommendation would be to take a look at games based on Cortex, games based on Fate. I think that they stand a fairly good chance of working for you in small one player, 2-player sessions, because they're a little bit more abstract. They don't make specific assumptions about the roles that characters are taking on. Does that help at all?
It sure does. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Gordon, what's your question, Gordon?
For me, I like dealing with players that have conflicting personalities. I always find that I tend to run like 5 people at a time, and I find that usually I'll have like 1 or 2 players that seem to want to go opposite directions or have an idea, but each one has like a conflicting idea, and so they start butting heads. Like, how do you deal with kind of those kind of personalities?
Okay, so these get into the role that no GM ever asked for. Have you ever seen the YouTube video or just heard the song "The DM's Lament"?
No.
Right, the chorus to this, I'm not going to sing it. I will just speak it for you. It's a kind of an Irish shanty jig, and the DM in this group is the singer and the performer in the video, and she says, "It's the DM's lament, the dungeon master's affliction. Resigned to the fact that I'm my friend's referee, their chaperone and mother. I never asked for this, but who else will take care of these adult babies?" Really kind of sums it up. You do end up in this position of having to be some sort of a mediating force between people at the table. And it's difficult. It's not fair.
Well, I know for like personal experience, like I've had like one-on-one sessions or kind of like group therapy where I get them together and try to like reason with them.
Right.
But I find, these have kind of given me a little more gun shy when it comes down to running games for like people like this.
Okay.
And generally ended up like, because I had a 1-year campaign going on with D&D, and by the end it was just 2 players that were messaging me or coming to me and complaining about the other player, that eventually I just kind of burned out and like I'm done.
Right.
So I just not sure how to tackle like those kind of situations anymore.
Yeah. So I have to say, I love Chris's comment here that all RPG is a form of therapy or a cry for help. And Tour Guide says not everyone is suited for playing together, and that's very true. And it's sad and it sucks when you have people that are in a small group and are not getting along. When it comes down to it, if we look at it from an interpersonal point of view, every person is responsible for their own behavior and managing their own feelings. I think we all, as an RPG group sitting down together at the table, we all have the responsibility of creating a space where people can express themselves. Uh, Open conversation tends to be the best way to resolve things, as long as that conversation can remain mature. We're now kind of getting into the philosophy or the psychology of group conflict. But I've found that being honest and kind with people is really the best way to go. It can feel really awkward. Sometimes you have to put somebody on the spot and you don't want to, but kind of bring it up and saying, hey, look, here's a thing that is really affecting the fun of people at the table. And you don't have to make it, hey, Steve, you're ruining everybody's fun. You could say, Andy and Steve, when you guys start doing X, Y, Z at the table, I'm noticing it's kind of really impacting on the fun that others are having. It's kind of dragging things to a halt. Do you think that there's a way that we can reduce the amount of that happens? I understand, you really know what you want to have out of the game. You really know what you want to have out of the game. You just kind of remind them, look, but it's a group. We all have to get something out of this game. And, if one of us is not having fun, then the rest of us are failing. We're not addressing someone's needs at the table. Now, it could be that you need to address those needs and find out what they are in the first place. Why is it that they're ending up so antagonistic toward each other? Are they looking to get two very different things out of the game? But when it comes down to it, you could have characters that are not cooperating with each other, but in the end, the players have to be able to cooperate, or the game is going to drag to a halt and die out. Somebody eventually will say, screw this game, I don't want to deal with this. And that's probably going to turn out to be more than one person who does it. And then, we're left playing World of Warcraft because there's no one to play real RPGs with. And that makes me sad. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for that. I guess I would direct you to a perhaps a graduate program in psychology.
Right. No, it's one that I've struggled with. It's hard to find an answer for it.
I consider myself very lucky. I've only ever been in the position where I needed to boot somebody one time from a group, and the friendship was lost over it. It was not my choice to terminate the friendship. The other person, I think that I was as kind as can be. I explained to them that, I didn't feel that this was the right game for them. Express that I understand that you want to play these types of games, and I get the feeling that XYZ is the kind of game that you're looking for. This game that I'm running here is an ABC game and not an XYZ game. And, we're really interested in continuing to play ABC. There's not a whole lot of, desire to try XYZ. I'm, super psyched that you got into this hobby. And I know a lot of people that are playing. Maybe I can help you find an XYZ game. I hope you find a group that is playing a game that you like. Kind of more framed it of we're not playing the kind of game that you like. And that's having a negative impact on us. It's having a negative impact on you. You are not having the good time that you're looking for. And the reason for that is this isn't a fit. We're not playing the game that you should be playing. And I don't say that with any kind of a judgment, a good, bad type thing. You suck, we're better, whatever. Just saying you're looking for a game that's chocolate chip, and this is a game, this game is maple walnut, right? It's just different flavors. If you think you can learn to love maple walnut and play maple walnut, I'd love to have you. But the way it seems that you're not interested in that. And so, I wish you well. I hope you find another group. I will help you find another group. But this person, they took it very personally, decided that I'm an a-hole, and flamed me on Facebook really hard. So let it roll off the back. I'm thankful for whatever level of maturity I have that I didn't let that get to me. But it can happen. Bo.
Hey, just a quick question, because I like your recommendation of reading multiple systems, even if you don't get them to the table. What's your recommendation on the like the study process, or like how to onboard, like, and, you know, what, no particular stance on Paizo products, but, you know, that's a rule intent system. Even if you're not going to play it, how do you recommend taking that information in and internalizing it? Do you read cover to cover? Do you have a strategy and a rule book, like when you read something new?
So generally, I have a tendency to look at three things, kind of in this order, because each game has its own shtick, right? It's about a certain topic, but it does things in a certain way. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to understand what this game's shtick is. Take Blades in the Dark. Blades in the Dark is kind of a game about kind of dirtbags who are gangs who commit crimes. So everything that I read in here, I know that, okay, this is going to be geared with that in mind. So typically I'll go ahead and take a look at what character creation comprises of, not the details of it, but like what are the things that are important? What does it seem like they're trying to define about these characters? That tells me an awful lot of what the game's about, and it gives me some quick peeks into like what is that system going to look like. The next thing I do is I'll flip back to the GM section and start looking at what kind of advice are they giving to GMs? What are they calling out as important? I'm keeping an eye out when I do this, usually for things that are new that I haven't seen before. And I really zero in on those quick, and I'll take a look at, is this something that's like really cool? If this is something that's really cool, that's definitely going to pull me back in to make me want to read more. But just kind of looking at understanding what the game's about, understanding what's important in the game in terms of, you know, what kinds of conflict is this game about, and what does it look like they use to resolve that kind of conflict. Examples of play are excellent. In fact, I wish more games would have play examples in them, because I think they're so helpful. Also, watching an actual play of that game can be helpful. Take it with a grain of salt that, you know, they could be off base. They might be playing the rules really different than they were written, but it can often give you an idea of like, what does this game play like? What might be interesting about it? All actual plays are not created equal. I'll throw that out there. Some of them are great. Some of them I'd rather get a root canal done than watch. But is that helpful?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And let me just look at the questions out here. Players squabbling, getting people back in character quickly. Oh yeah. So Angela, getting people back in character quickly. Let me jump back of where is it? Here we go. Bing bing. Address the characters, not the players. Put your DM hat on and address their character. In fact, the more you can address their character and less you address them, it's going to sound wrong, but the less you talk to them as a person and the more you talk to them as a character, that's going to have a side effect of keeping their head in game better, because it's putting them on like, oh, okay, I'm Zanzibar right now. I'm not Eddie, right? And so kind of you can do little things like just like poke somebody back into the little spot that you need them in. Why do you want a long campaign versus small adventure or a series of them? What am I hoping that will add to the experience? I'm really okay with one shots. I don't know if there's any younger. I'll just call myself, I'm an RPG slut, and I don't mean that with a negative connotation. Just mean like I am very promiscuous and will play anything. I will run any RPG. I like to run lots of different RPGs. I'm not always interested in running the same thing over and over and over again. So for me, convention gaming is fantastic, because like every game is a one shot, and I could GM 5 different games at a convention, 5 different systems. So I enjoy that. But in terms of, I like telling these tightly knit stories. So even when I'm doing a campaign, I have a tendency to run it as an episodic show rather than a 3-part movie. Each session kind of tells a story and has resolution. There may be an uber plot that ties all the sessions together, but I'm not focused on typically like slow progression through one mega thing. I like to have kind of bite-sized chapters along the way that are satisfying in and of themselves. Some people love the long campaign. Some people are so attached to the long campaign that a decision as to whether or not to kill a character becomes a major like a life event for you. There are some people that are literally going to be reduced to tears if their character dies. I think as part of that, what are we playing conversation you have at the beginning, that's probably an important thing to address. Like, how do we feel about character death? Is character death with resurrection something that's part of this game? Do we want that resurrection to be rare? How much of an impact do we want character death to make on the campaign? Or is character death even a thing? You're going to find very different responses to that. People have very different opinions. People like to put so much time and energy into a character that they played for 5 years. The idea of starting over is like a horror show to them. I don't generally think that way. I come from a GM's point of view. So to me, every character in the story, whether it's a player character or an NPC, every character has a function. Every character has a story arc. Some story arcs get cut short, and it's more interesting for them to be cut short. Other story arcs rise, fall, and end. Maybe that story arc didn't end at that person's death of old age. Maybe their story arc ended in a sacrifice. So during the rare times when I play, I have a tendency to treat my characters like I treat NPCs, and that they are alive only as long as it's interesting. And I don't mean I get bored. I just mean in terms of the context of the story. If the story really calls for a character to die, like, okay, I don't have a problem with sacrificing this character. I'm just going to go play another one. Because my normal jam is, well, I'm going to play 87 different characters in this session because I'm the GM and I bounce around from NPCs. So it doesn't bother me. But people have definitely different feelings about long campaigns, and within that, especially when it has to do with their characters dying. So very good consideration. Thank you very much, Paul. Does anybody else have any live questions? If not, I'll go ahead and answer the pre-submitted ones. I'll start in on those, and if I see a hand get raised, I'll go ahead and call. So Gordo Freemaz says, looking forward to the session. I'm just trying a new game type. Group not interested, so need to find a new group of players looking locally. Someone else actually asked me this about trying to find new groups. I am going to add some of those resources to the notes to this, and so hopefully I'll have something for you in there. Oh yeah, player personal space. Yep. So let me jump to that. I gave a session at Gencon a ways back. I don't remember where I put it, but I wrote a blog article on the impacts of psychology of kind of physical space as it pertains to game tables. So keeping these things as thoughtful things to be intentional and in mind about. The layout and structure of the table has a very big impact on things, whether you're using a rectangular or circular table, where the GM positions themselves at the table, whether or not the GM uses a screen, where that screen is located. All of these things communicate a tone. If I'm sitting at the head of the table and I have a screen in front of me that's separating my domain from your domain, that imparts with it a different sense of authority and control over the game. You can use that for certain types of games. That's really necessary. For other types of games, it's not. There's other configurations where maybe you are like that, but the screen isn't a divider between my space and your space. The screen is a divider between our space and adventure space or GM space, but I inhabit your space as well as the GM space. So that could be like using the corner of a table, or if you're at a long table, you're not at the head, you're on one of the sides, off to the side, and you've got your section where you're keeping your stuff, but there's also space in front of you that's more open. That communicates a very different thing. It still keeps that, okay, this area is the power area, and sometimes I'm in it and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm one of you. Sometimes I'm in the power area. And this is it's a little tiny thing that if you understand how it affects the group, you can transition between those two things as needed. Another huge advantage you have, and this isn't going to work because I'm on camera, but if I'm talking about something as we're going and I start to slide my chair back from the table a little bit, this communicates a dynamic. I am most likely going to be standing. And as I stand, I create a different space at the table. I can stand back, I can stand and leaning forward, moving in towards someone, encroaching on their space. These all manipulate a sense of, I guess I'll call it control, but it's more like a tension level. The higher and closer I am relatively to you, that's going to impart more stress upon you. It's just the natural human response to things. And when you can take something like that and kind of play it like an instrument, really, you can really up the intensity feelings of your game in ways that people may not even be aware that's happening, but they're experiencing it, but they don't necessarily know why. The more friendly things get with the NPCs, so the lower you are, the further back you are. Body language, taking a taller, so much that you can do without ever calling attention to it, that is very subtly shifting the space in there. It's a kind of player personal space like that. Even far less complex and or I don't know, sinister is just who's sitting next to who. Small groups work better in certain ways. So that's kind of what I was referring to. Darth Charles. Oh, AC. Are you so you're building one? You're not buying one from Wormwood? Those guys, their factory is about 10 miles from my house. I've never been to visit them yet, but their stuff is beautiful. Darth Charles has been playing for a long time, part-time GM, tips, thoughts for other encounters, or ideas for play sessions, my gaming session 1 or 2 to traveling or fight. Ideas my party can do to change things up. Story. Get hooked into the story. That's what I'm saying. Find those little story hooks, find things that they're interested in, and those will naturally lead to where they want to go. You can raise hands in the camera, hit your yes, no, raise hand in the app thing. How many of you have experienced a thing where you're having a conversation about your game and you talk about this one time we didn't even roll dice? How many people have experienced that? Anybody, if you've not experienced that yourself, have you had friends talk about it? They talk about this one session like, oh my God, like we didn't even have a single combat encounter. And they're talking about that like it's a good thing. This is really common. And it's the kind of anecdote that people love to go to when they're talking about their game. They're so excited about it. And you look at it like, what the heck was it that was so excited to say it was all role play? I'll tell you what kind of role play it wasn't. It wasn't them having meaningless conversations with the innkeeper, right? They got hooked into the story. They were engaged. They liked what was happening, and they wanted to see where it went. And they just kept on going. They didn't get distracted. No one was bored. No one said like, oh my God, I need to roll some dice here. And, maybe there are some dice rolls for, social interconflict, things like that, helping direct it. But the focus was in on what's happening in the story. And sometimes that involves fights. Sometimes that involves traveling. And sometimes that involves just this session where we're all having a conversation in and about the game. When it comes down to it, a great RPG session is just an extended conversation. All right, next one came from MS Bird, a little bit of experience. Switching between NPCs, do it quickly, or if they're interacting with each other at all. Any advice for fast swapping? I go straight to my index cards. Have those index cards ready, because all you need to do is take a quick glance at it. You see that name, and you see those 3 things. You may have forgotten those 3 things because you got 50 billion different characters in your head, but as soon as you see those 3 things again, you're going to instantly summon up that character and remember a lot about them. Yeah, look at that. Becky's already got some index cards there. Love it. Is that me? Am I a character that you just created there? I wonder what my 3 things are. Is bald, overly energetic, and encyclopedic knowledge of RPGs. So yeah, fast swapping. Have those index cards. Tools. Cheat. Any way you can. If you find a tool that helps you use that tool, there's no need to try and do it all on your own. Heartfruit says, my games are really choppy and I don't always smoothly transition when players do something I wasn't expecting. Don't want to feel like they're on a train, but I don't want to be sitting there desperately flipping through my notes. They decided to go left instead of right. Tips on preparing for the unexpected. If your preparation went like that and you do need those notes, my best advice to you is left is right. And the other one isn't going to matter until they go back to it. And you can constantly move things around however you need to, just in order to help yourself. You keep things moving. Let's say, if we look at all the rooms, I'll just use a dungeon, right? I've got 10 different rooms at a dungeon. Those are 10 different things on the buffet. Does it matter that much where each item is on the buffet? Sure, it makes sense for the salad to be the first item on the buffet and the desserts to be at the end, but is there anything that's going to stop a person from going up to that buffet and just grabbing whatever the hell it is that they want? The answer is no. People are going to grab what they want or what they see or what was interested to them. That may happen in your plot or your dungeon as well. They may go to certain spaces that you didn't expect them to go there first, but the overall experience consists of all these things on the buffet. So sometimes you can move things around and that just solves the problem for you and you get back to it later. That's a great motto to have, or I guess a little piece of advice is like, we'll fix it later. We'll do it now. We'll fix it later. This one comes down to none of this stuff is important. Players are amazing at missing larger plot cues, refusing to do that, doing a lot of right is left. Yeah. So, move the cheese, give them a clue by 4, give them a hook. That's typically the best thing. There may be a key NPC for them. If they're not hooking onto the one that you wanted it to be, find a way to make it someone else, but get them hooked on that someone else first. Do one of those question and answer type things. Drop somebody in their lap. Put them in a tight place. Make them make a decision about something that seems innocuous. Loaded questions are the best way of doing that. The thing I said with the vizier being angry, right? I just established outright, okay, he's mad and he's mad at one of you. Well, from my point of view, all I need for my plot is that he be mad at somebody. It doesn't matter to me what he's mad about. Doesn't matter to me who he's mad at. It just needs to be one of the players. So since I throw that question out and they get themselves hooked into it and they get themselves interested in it, questions are a great way of getting people motivated in the right direction. GT Appert. I'm new. It'll be my first game online. Gencon, my group of friends, a good few of us are just playing. We lack experienced GM. I'm willing to do it. Awesome. GTA Appert, if you're still here, awesome. Tips for first-time GMing: how to lead an enjoyable campaign despite lacking player experience. Relax. First thing to do is just always, always, always relax. Watch some actual plays to get a vibe for it. Don't hold yourself to those standards. A lot of the people doing those actual plays have been doing this for as long as I have, been doing it longer than I have. If you watch that Critical Role one, I mean, the GM there's an actor. So, don't feel like you got to do voices the way he does. He's a voice actor, for goodness sake. You've been doing this forever. Don't hold yourself to that standard. Just take it as an idea of like, well, what is it I'm trying to do? What is it that the people seem to be interested in? What is it that makes this cool? And it's not the talent level of the GM, really. It's the effort they're putting into it. It's the passion that they're putting into it. Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing with the writing. Like, you are not gonna write, the next The Stand. And that's okay. I can still enjoy writing. I can still enjoy sharing my stuff, even though I know I am never going to write anything that good. But I can still enjoy writing. I can still have a great time. I'm never going to throw a 105-mile-an-hour fastball. That doesn't mean I can't enjoy and have a great time playing baseball with my friends. So, really, the first thing is just, so JT Appert, just try and relax and do the best you can. That's all you can ask. I'll tell you, when I started GMing at 8 years old, I think, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. I don't know how any of my friends were willing to come back and play with me a second time. It probably wasn't until I was like 12 or 13 that I really started figuring out what it was I was even supposed to be doing. So for a good long while, I was terrible. And it's okay. Just keep doing it. Don't be afraid to fail. Just like characters need to fail forward to keep the story moving, you as a GM, you can fail forward and keep your GM story, your GM career moving forward. You learn something from everything. All right. Does anybody have anything else? Okay, I got Angela and then tour guide, and then I think we'll call it a day. Angela, you first.
I think I raised my hand for a poll you did. I didn't actually have a question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So it looks like the other hand has come down. Does anybody else have anything that you want to chat about? Any questions or anything like that? If not, I wish you a great, happy rest of your Gen Con. I am super honored that you gave 2 hours of your time to hang out with me. I hope you found it useful. And I forgot how many of you left. There's 30 of you left, so I think I'm going to know the answer to this one, but where is it? I had one more poll I meant to send out at the end, and it is, if I can make it go. How do you feel about GMing now? And go ahead and answer that. All right, we got most people have answered, a little more than half. And I got nobody who feels worse. So that's good. Everybody feels either better or the same. So have a great Gen Con, everybody. And I hope maybe I'll see you next year. Bye.